Trio?
Well, the Kingston Trio was Frank Werber's enterprise, and he was their manager. He bought North Beach with their proceeds of their career.
They made that much.
Well, he owned
They
the
did that
building
well?
that Coppola owns now.
Biggest act.
What's that? You know, that copper covered.
Right.
You know,
That's
that's
where
an
we
entire
recorded.
block.
Zoetrope.
Columbus Towers. Yeah,
They
they owned that. They,
Yeah, right.
they owned
They had an Italian
clubs. You know, no, he just, you know.
Julie or something.
So they were big, the Kingston Trio.
But it wasn't for no.
Tom Dooley was the number one record, baby.
Yeah,
But they were bigger than that. It wasn't just the number one record. They sold, I believe the technical term is shitloads of albums.
Kingston Trio were the biggest act in music for
Some
3
time,
or 4 years.
Yeah.
You know?
In '59, they had 4 of the top 10 albums.
Yeah.
Well, they sold albums like nobody. Capitol Records, they were paying the rent on Capitol Records when Sinatra was recording for Capitol.
And then they just retired.
No, they never just retired. I bet there's a Kingston Trio out there today.
Yeah, they might be playing gigs. I don't know.
There's somebody. I mean, you
They
know.
kept selling music?
Shane hasn't played with them for a
Because
long time.
I mean, for me, you know, I remember it was like the Kingston Trio and then Big Brother and the Holding Company. And it was pretty much, it was a quick transition.
In between there was
Well,
the Beach
all it
Boys.
took was
Beach
one
Boys.
tab, and that was it.
Kingston Trio.
That's true in the beginning.
And Lightning Hopkins
Murray's
was in there
idea.
somewhere. You know, there was Kingston Trio and then Mance
Well, the
Lipscomb and you
the-
know, all those
the
guys.
Beach Boys plus Lightning Hopkins equals Big Brother and the Holding Company.
I tell you, I got to say, Sam, you know, really, the more that I've thought about it, and you guys might have really been, as far as just completely being yourself. On a good night, you guys were almost just like the funkiest thing, but it was so intense.
We thought you were.
Yeah, well, we were more traditional. You know, we had
Yeah.
all that, you know,
Right.
all the harmonics.
You had chops, yeah.
But no, but you guys just had this thing.
We were going for it.
Yeah, no, we would talk about it all the time, going, you know, what's up with those guys? And then when we were all managed at West Pole, you know, with Julius.
Yeah. Do you remember coming over to my house with David Shalleck and
Oh,
you
yeah,
guys
I do.
played
I do.
Frosty the Snowman or something, and it was so good. God, it was the best version of the song I'd ever heard.
I do
I was
remember
like
that.
floored, you know, it's like, whoa. It was so good. What was that? Was it Frosty the Snowman?
Oh,
Or
I
was
think
it
it
one of the
was.
Christmas songs?
I think it was, I'm trying to think of the name.
Santa Claus is coming to town?
Yeah,
No.
Santa Claus is coming.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
And I said, God, is there a circle of
How-
fists in there?
Yeah,
and
right,
And you went, no, we're just having fun, man. you know.
How did you guys meet?
Well, I think we met initially. You know, I've got to know Sam really here, kind of in the later years, but we've known each other probably since.
Yeah.
We were managed by West Pole, and West Pole was Quicksilver, Big Brother, Sons, and the Ace of Cups. So, you know, everybody crossed each other's path, and then we played like a lot of different gigs.
Were they in that building that we're talking about?
Remember the
Fugazi.
Martha?
Fugazi.
Yeah.
Was that it? Or
It
no?
was-
It was
it
something like
It was
that.
54 Martha, where the
Remember that?
where the office was.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right.
But where Francis Ford Coppola's building in North Beach?
Oh yeah, no, that's
Was that Fugazi
it's
or
the,
anyway?
It's the little one that's shaped like a
Yeah,
triangle, like goes
like a
that,
flat
with
iron.
the big cupola on the top. You know?
Flatiron Building.
So, Tom Donahue's name comes up all the time. What was he exactly? What did he do exactly? Why is he so revered?
Well, because his choice of music was amazing, and he was just a great DJ, and
They did KMPX.
Donahue, Donahue
adventurous
looms so large
playlist.
in my mind in all these years later. Just so much more than a disc jockey. I mean, you know, of all the guys
Way more.
that were wheeling and dealing back then, he was a visionary. He saw around the corner.
And
And
he played.
He invented the whole idea of, you know, FM radio rock.
He would play Eric Satie, and then he'd play Sons of Champlin,
Yeah.
you know, and then he played J.S. Bach, and then he'd play, you know, Big Brother, and he mixed it up. He played everything.
And then there's the guy himself, 6'5",
Yeah, just giant.
450
Yeah,
pounds, like an Orson Welles character, right?
Yeah,
And with this voice,
exactly.
this basso profundo.
Yeah.
And he was hipper than you, he was smarter than you,
Yeah.
he was funnier than you.
it was very neat. Trish Robbins introduced me to him, you know.
Oh, yeah.
When did he
Cartoons.
start? When did he go on air? When did he start?
He came
radio?
to San Francisco in 1961, having been chased out of Philadelphia on a payola scandal with another disc jockey named Bobby Mitchell. And the two of them had KYA mapped out. Tom came on at 8 o'clock at night. He said his opening line every night was, "I'm here to clean up your face and mess up your mind."
Yeah.
And they ruled San Francisco's music scene from 61 on. They produced concerts at the Cow Palace with Chubby Checker and the Ronettes and all these things, Phil Spector conducting the orchestra. They had a record label. They discovered a record producer named Sly Stone, and he made hit records with Bobby Freeman. They had a nightclub on Broadway. They owned racehorses. It was a happening endeavor, and then LSD entered the picture. Yeah, then things really got good.
And then he met Rachel Donahue.
Rachel, oh my God, Rachel Donahue.
Still great.
Still great. Still,
Yeah.
I mean, Rachel Donahue was about 95 pounds, got a waist about that size, and you just look at these married couple and think that their relations must involve apparatus. There's no other explanation.
And I'm sure you've thought it out in great detail. I'm certain.
Am I wrong? Is that right? I couldn't help but
that's
think
right.
about
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
No,
She's still
Rachel
beautiful.
Donahue, you want to know how great Rachel Donahue is? I called Rachel up, and I said, Rachel, where is Tom buried? And she says, oh, it was a sunny day.
Yeah.
Let me think. Was it in Marin? I'm
Maybe.
telling you, she can't even remember where she left him.
Maybe he was cremated.
As long as someone does.
Well, that's not necessarily that.
So
bad
this was-
state
this-
of mind,
So
Yeah.
great.
Oh, this
It's
is-
Rachel, you know.
There's a quality of don't look back that's
Yeah.
quite excellent. You know?
So
And it probably keeps her looking the way she does.
Where's
She's
she now?
Beautiful.
Beautiful, yeah.
Somewhere
She
in the
lives in
Midwest. Montana, yeah.
And she runs a video company and produces videos.
Yeah. Beautiful one. Still.
She's
So
an amazing gal.
I think one of the-
go ahead.
I think one of the things that really was so enjoyable about Tom Donahue was his voice. You know,
Yeah.
you'd sit there and he was on FM anyway, so it had all those FM quality of sound. And you'd smoke a big one and he'd play those tunes. And just like Sam said, the way they were put together and his voice was this big sonorous kind of super stone thing. So it just played right into everything perfectly.
Yeah.
No, I think he's an unsung hero. You know, people
Yeah.
have kind of forgotten about him, but to me,
Yeah.
he was like
The
brilliant
first.
and visionary in ways that like Bill Graham wasn't.
Yeah.
You know, Bill
Oh,
Graham
yeah,
sort of street
yeah.
smart and hustler and wanted to get your money and all that kind of stuff. But Tom, he saw the big picture.
More in ways that Chet Helms was.
Yes.
And he was kind of on that thing.
Chet was definitely what had the big picture.
Yeah.
This sounds
Yeah.
like you're talking about the big picture after LSD entered the scene.
There was no scene before LSD.
There was no scene.
Well, there was because like the scene was like, you know, the Mystery Train and Blackburn and Snow and like, you know, like Frank was one of the biggest
Go-go clubs on Broadway.
Go-go clubs on Broadway.
Brummels.
And like the first Sons album that came out that we did with Frank, it's pretty much like we kind of sound like Beatles.
Tight, white, and bright.
Yeah, tight, white, and bright. It's like, no real playing, just but you know tunes. All these
Yeah.
cute like 3 minutes and 20-second tunes.
You guys didn't really ever get much better than Fat City.
No. I think well that all came out of the opposite six. You know, so we left that, then we came back to it.
Where were you playing? Where were the venues?
Oh gee, you know, let's.
I mean, what was going before
Madero
the
Rec
Avalon
Center.
Ballroom and the
Santa
Carousel?
Venetia Armory.
Corte Madero Rec Center, Santa Venetia Armory. We played every single high school just about in the Bay Area because KFRC sponsored us to go to all these high schools, and they didn't pay us very much, but you know Werber actually hooked up the whole thing. And so, you know, to this day, there's no place where, you know, anybody in the Suns doesn't go where people say, you played at my high school?
Yeah.
Where did Werber come from?
Where? I don't remember. I don't know where.
He just showed up. I
Story.
mean,
No, he's, you know, there's a major missing link there.
but he had I mean, was he a big presence, or was he just sort of low-key and behind the
Oh,
scenes?
no,
I mean,
he was
he a big character?
presence
Yeah.
on every level, you know.
Yeah.
He was busted for pot. They broke, you know, the guys broke in here. I mean, he was so notorious that they robbed the downstairs and upstairs. They came in the middle of the night and cut a big, huge hole in the floor downstairs and came and took the safes, took everything out of the place, you know. And Frank was famous for pot, and he'd been busted for marijuana, managed to get out of that. He had the best marijuana anybody ever smoked. And
this was...
he would always claim...
Then.
Yeah, this was...
This is when...
I mean, this was amazing.
This is before the vintage year.
Yeah.
You know?
No, this
Before,
was like...
before it was in boutiques and labels.
He used to call it gold, and one of the things Frank used to tell us, he said, the guy I get it from claims to sell Walt Disney a half a pound of this once a month for his artists.
That would explain a lot.
Yeah. And he meant it. He meant it as far as he was concerned.
So Walt used to get it for his artists. That's
I mean, you know, the weed has a long and honorable history in the arts. It's not just like rock and roll musicians
Right.
discovered it or anything.
No.
right.
No, I think so. Like when I was meeting all my dad's friends, you know, and all these great
Louis
musicians.
Armstrong, every day of his adult life. Bing
Yeah.
Crosby, every day of his adult life.
Right.
Peggy Lee, Tony Bennett.
Bing
I ran
Crosby.
into Tony Bennett. He was in a lobby of a Beverly Hills hotel, and I walked up to him and I said, Tony, I just wanted to say thanks for all those long-term marijuana use studies you've been running. And he looked at me like, huh? And then he smiles and he goes, you're very welcome.
Actually, Tony Bennett is actually a very cool guy. Huh?
No kidding.
Oh,
Yeah.
extremely. When you look at all his civil rights stuff and everything, man, the guy's really amazing.
And he won't sing the Star Spangled Banner at baseball games because it's a war song and he's a pacifist. He'll sing America the Beautiful, but that's all.
Good
That's
painter.
good. I didn't know that. That's good.
He's a fucking
Yeah.
cool guy.
So how did the LSD thing sort of seep into it?
The LSD things seep into it.
Let's see, the LSD, the LSD thing seeped into it because...
Owsley.
Yeah, well, Owsley eventually ended up being part of it, but, you know, it was Tim Leary and Richard Albert and them doing those experiments at Harvard. And,
Yeah.
And that caught your attention.
And the Stanford.
I did it
research
a long time
was
before
the dead got onto
before the scene, you know,
But
as
I think
a
Owsley
kind
started
of a,
producing
not to
it since
party,
before.
but as an
he would
intellectual
make a
exercise, you know.
Hold that thought.
Yeah.
Whenever he would make a batch, he'd give me a big old sack of them. And he all his friends, he'd give like, you know, maybe 200, 500 hits in these little leather bags. And so that's, you know, we would have like, you know, these bags of White Lightning, Purple Haze. And I know, it was truly amazing stuff.
But Sam, you did it.
As a student
As a
of
student?
it, you know, yeah, as a graduate student, I was
Like
at
what
UC
Kesey was
Berkeley,
doing.
and we would take it as not to party, not to go party, but it was you know, think about a
was never-
given
As-
subject.
as a
it was
lab
never
rat.
a party. It wasn't recreational. Yeah, it was, you know.
Did you see the party potential in it when you first did it, or?
Actually,
No, not really.
It was
Never-
a
never
serious
did.
enterprise.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know
It
how
was
it was?
sobering.
Yeah.
In a funny way. It
Yeah.
was sobering.
yeah.
Yeah, it was, your whole life was going to change.
People change.
Oh, I know.
And the thing is, and you guys are ideal to explore this topic, is that it wasn't just the LSD. The LSD was an entry point to reconsidering everything.
That's right,
And the music was a part of that, and smoking pot was part of it, and our political viewpoints were part of it, and our personal relationships and the changing sexual mores were part of it. It was all up for consideration because it had been shown to be so shallow and transparent.
All of human history.
All of human history, absolutely. In a second,
on a subatomic level
On a
also.
subatom-
you know,
and
yeah.
this isn't crazy.
Yeah.
It sounds crazy to people that haven't had the experience, you know, but you know that Sufi saying, right, is that people who don't hear the music, the dancers look crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at some point, you had a sneaking suspicion that there might be some kind of a connection with that in the music.
Well, you know, I would take it and we would play at the Avalon, you know, and my guitar would turn into this, you know, rubber neck kind of, you know, leaning over, and all the strings would fall off. You remember that?
The beast is down there.
And it was like, What key is this?
But they're
in front of an audience
Yeah.
liberally filled with people on stage.
Yeah, right.
Shared
So,
consciousness.
Yeah, shared consciousness.
Amazing experience.
It's a fairly common experience to go out and play like a 2-hour set and come back and look at somebody and go, well, when do we go on?
Which is a great feeling, actually. Yeah.
I don't know.
But-
I remember being New Year's Eve at Winterland, '68, and the Dead were playing. And there was 5,400 people in the audience and 6 people on stage. And I think everybody was on LSD, right?
Yeah.
Everybody. And it
large
was
portion
such
of people.
a
I was.
sensitive environment.
Yeah.
Everybody was on the vibe.
Yeah.
Ooh.
No,
You know, it's when we were, our manager, who we'd met at the Fillmore, he was cooking at the Fillmore with, what was it, Ivan?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, and he saw us play, and he did shows with Gary Snyder, and he was an excellent photographer, and he just worked there because the scene was so cool. And we hadn't had any psychedelic experiences at all. We'd smoked a little pot. And it took about a year of hanging out with him and reading Gary Snyder and looking at Hindu religion, looking at Buddhism, you know, looking at Christianity a different way before we even took any psychedelics. And then they gave us some peyote. We took peyote.
Yeah.
And that was pretty good. And then after the peyote trips, then we took LSD. But it took a long time because there was a whole mindset of really, you know, everything's everything, that we can really change the whole way that we learn things, the way we perceive things. We have so many more levels of...
But I'm real curious about how it works with the music. Because I think,
Well,
I think that
I'll tell you what
the
I
music
think.
was highly influenced by it, and I think the music was what it was.
But I'll tell you what I think
Yeah.
is that
It wasn't sort of an adjunct.
when you get that high, sound is the #1 most primary thing. It's the last thing to leave you when you die. It's about the first thing you perceive. It's just such an amazing thing for the human nervous system that it's not just music, it's just sound. You know, sound
The
in general.
vibratory universe.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know, if there's any one thing that I really appreciate Carlos Santana for, it's like when he really does his hippie rap about the sound and the cosmic vibrations, because, you know, I sign up for that too. I really appreciate
It's all reality is a vibration of these tiny strings, according to physicists.
Where did
Have you not been introduced to the concept of the vibratory universe?
I think
Because this is a common thread in talking
Yes,
about this stuff with psychedelic musicians. They are not blues musicians. They're plugged in to a search for evolved consciousness, and the music is part of that. And I think a lot of the connection also has to do because under the influence of LSD and you're tuned into the vibratory universe, just putting your hands on an electric guitar, wow.
Or anything else, even
Yeah.
this table, right now.
watch it levitate.
But the reverberations of electric instruments were particularly seductive to people on LSD.
Where did that sound come from? That sound that you got from your guitar and all those San Francisco, those psychedelic guitars, there's like a distinctive sound
No, I'll tell you.
to those
I'll
guitars.
tell you, like Sam's a very, very high beat. And same with it with Jim, like they were the guys I keyed on. And in some very primitive way, because he's really educated and he's very intelligent. And so to get away from that whole thing and really, you know, you go to this very primitive place, and it would be so amazing to watch him play, because I was taught and trained, you know, and I'd watch Sam and I'd watch Jim and I'd just go, you know what, the energy is, that's really where I want to go right there. Whatever it is you're doing, that's where I'd like to go.
We would not play, I don't know, you know, a major 7th chord for years. You know, we were like afraid of it because it was too educated. You know, we're trying to take it back to, you know,
one of the things that I really learned, because in my world everybody was really pretty, really well taught with music and had been doing it all their lives. And I realized at some point that the voice that everybody could hear was going to come from people that were artists who also played music, but it really wasn't going to come from musicians because they were too far gone already. They couldn't actually incorporate that real LSD experience into just the music they played.
Right.
That's why so many of the really cool people in the scene, you know, were all artists.
It's
at
true, they all,
school and
you know,
decided to get further into their
Not only
instrument.
in that scene, but like in the punk scene and several other ones later. You know, there were art students, and it was kind of, you know, it was not to take it so seriously or something. I don't know. You know,
And just
liberating.
Yeah.
Was there a moment at a show where like something happened with that, like that psychedelic sound, that rush that, I mean, I know about? Were you like conscious that there's something going on here?
Every night.
No, but it started somewhere, right? There was because you weren't playing guitar like that. You guys were playing guitar like that.
It was just more like you'd sit on that stage. We were lucky enough to sit on that stage, and if you had any, you know, empathetic feelings for people, you just look at that stage, and the first thing you go is, God, we are one living organism. We're one unified field of stuff, and that was it.
Yeah.
You know,
As Barry Melton says, it was a nice 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I've spent years and years and years talking to these guys about this kind of stuff, and it really quickly floats off into this kind, and that's where it was, that's where it lived, and it's hard to explain that.
Right.
If you're looking for an aha moment, well, I'll tell you the closest things to the aha moment in the San Francisco scene, I think, was the Butterfield Band showing up.
That's true. That was a big one.
Because these guys,
was a big
well,
aha
they
moment.
could
Sure
play.
was. Yeah.
They were actually
They were like a
competent on their instruments.
well-greased, oiled machine from Chicago.
And they,
Right,
and
but they weren't- but they weren't-
They moved right into the next room in the
Yeah.
heliport next to us.
The first thing they did was they became like us.
Yeah.
You know,
They were over at
you
that
know,
heliport.
it was
I'll-
so great.
I'll
you
tell
know,
you.
before.
To show you the difference, I love Nick Gravenitis, and I think he's one of the most beautiful voices and greatest guys. And when I first met Nick, he always carried a shit, you know? I mean, he was from Chicago. And they were very serious about it.
A pick.
And I remember coming in there, and a couple of guys had their pants legs rolled up, and they just, you know, shot up. But I was so naive. I walked in there, and I looked at their legs, all the tracks, and I said, you know, you can get some stuff for those bites. And then everybody in the band's like, in the Butterfield band's looking at me going, oh, shit.
So they were
Funny.
different, but they weren't psychedelic though.
Well, you know, Michael was
Bloomfield-
bipolar.
Michael what?
Michael
Dr.
Bloomfield
Yeah.
went east-west under LSD. Elvin didn't, Mike did, Butterfield did, you
You
know.
know, in the end run, you know, when it's all measured, Elvin was the most incredible person of all of them.
You know, Butterfield, astonishing character, and what a musical force. But you know what Elvin told me? Elvin told me when he met Butterfield didn't play harmonica, he played guitar.
Right.
And he saw Butterfield pick up the harmonica, and he said in 6 months, he got as good as he was
Yeah.
ever going to be.
Which
Yeah.
was very good. Yeah, it was great.
But a really astonishing musical force. Elvin, underrated, amazing person.
Remember that album that he put out with that great band there? It was just, I mean, it was just amazing there in '69 or
With the
'70.
Pointer Sisters singing on it and
Yeah,
everything.
no, that was such an amazing, we used to listen to that all the time.
Applejack.
Yeah, that was really great.
What was the name of it? Pig Boy Crabshaw.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, but no, and Elvin's really quite the, he's quite the special human, just in general.
He's a grower,
Yeah.
among other things.
Well, you know,
he's an
quarters
amazing.
an acre of-
He's an amazing guy.
Recurring
yeah.
theme.
I used to have this farm because I'm a master gardener. And so Elvin and I, we would, every year, you know, we lived about 4 miles apart from each other. So every year we'd pick 2 vegetables that we were, and it was all just food. Elvin doesn't grow any crazy stuff. But we just picked 2 vegetables and we'd grow every variety that we could possibly find. And, you know, grow them. And I'd grow half of them at my place and he'd grow half of them at his place. And then we'd know, you know, what the best bean was for our area. And when somebody would go out on the road, then the other person would come and make sure that all the seedlings got watered and everything was good.
And you grow too, don't you?
I get my pepper seedlings from Elvin.
Yeah, wow.
What's the pepper thing about? Where'd that come from?
What do you mean? Don't you like to eat peppers?
On occasion.
know, I mean,
I never started growing them in
Well,
18 different
you
varieties.
You go to the store, and you can buy a couple different kinds of peppers, and they're nice, they're fine. But you know, you get into growing many different kinds. There's a wide world of peppers available to the person who's got soil and seeds and stuff like that. And it's
Flavors, the kind of heat.
everything. I mean, you just go, you know, it's just what's sitting there at Safeway isn't even the tip of the iceberg.
Are there other people who do this?
Yes.
Pepper growers?
Yeah,
Alvin
now I say-
Bishop.
Is that like a big thing?
That's where I get my pepper seedling.
What-
And people know about that, and they bring him seeds from all over the world.
Larry, the reason that we did what we did, in its just sweetest place, was to give everybody permission to do whatever it is that they wanted to do. And a lot of people wanted to go back to the land and grow food,
Right.
and have a non-stressed out life, and just put their hands in the dirt. And most of the really great, you know, food, environmental issues have come from all of us being on LSD.
That was one thing out of the 60s. Yeah.
Right, but that lasted, what, like 2 or 3 years?
Well,
No,
it's been a
still,
real-
with
going on. Yeah.
Locavores,
No, I mean, but the whole going back to the land.
Well, what do you think
Yeah.
the locavore movement is?
Yeah. Buy
Eating
local.
locally
Yeah. Buy
and
local. Yeah.
eating locally grown food. No,
Yeah.
it's amazing the reverberations of the LSD experience. The whole personal computer industry is based on people who had LSD experiences that led them into new
Yeah.
ways of thinking and dealing with information.
Yeah, I'm a great believer in that.
Steve Jobs.
Yeah. And the compassion thing too about, you know, people who are challenged in one way or another, that came out of that started happening.
I see
in the
yoga
60s.
classes at strip malls, and I think,
Yeah.
aha, the Haight-Ashbury lives.
Well, you know, it's just kind of tied into your perceptions of what it means to be a human. I just think there's inherent good inside everybody, given an environment for it to come out.
Yeah.
Right, but
That's why we love Terry.
it's true. Look, it's
There's
true.
Not many of us
It's
that feel
true.
that way about our brother man.
Right. It's true, but the thing kind of came through like a wave, vibrated.
It didn't leave us.
It didn't. Well, right, but it didn't stick culturally.
Well, you know what they say
Well,
is
yes,
that
yes,
it's a
it would.
dream doesn't die.
But-
you know, a dream gets crushed and rolled
No,
over
you guys-
and stepped on, but it doesn't go away.
Yeah,
You
know,
think so?
because
So
you're
where do
not
you
thinking-
where do you see it now? I mean, it was so exciting when it was happening. I mean, it was like this
Yoga
unbelievable.
classes in strip malls,
Larry,
Larry.
everything functional lives, everything that's not goes away. But the core of a lot of functional ideas that make our world go were the premises that we changed from how we were raised in the 50s and the values and coming into the 60s.
We did not fail, Larry.
So,
No, I never
I think we won.
I never said you failed.
Yeah, it's
And
still
I think,
here.
And
It's
I
still
think
here.
one of the
But it doesn't have the same urgency and
who?
excitement.
But it's
well, I don't.
but it's
well,
so
good question. I mean,
accepted.
are
It's because
kids
it's
doing
so
it? I mean,
accepted now,
is there
you know?
anything that kids are doing now that is as exciting to them as this was to you when you
the
were?
same
Yeah,
exact
I
thing
think
that
that-
we
Okay.
did and we are doing.
We don't know it because we're our age.
No, we don't. Like
Yeah.
my son's one of the top programmers for Microsoft. And at that level, they're still just as full-on idealistic hippies. But you know,
Yeah.
they're not.
But they're not doing psychedelics.
The hell they aren't.
Well, they
Yeah.
sure did at one point.
Did you visit the Burning Man episode?
No, I
Those
haven't.
guys are
You're
all
gonna
on
find
drugs.
hardly
Yeah, but
anybody
it's
at that.
but it's what, it's ecstasy and
It's a psychedelic drug, my friend.
Well,
ecstasy?
no, you know what?
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
it's not LSD.
Anyway,
It's not LSD, but it is a psychedelic drug.
Yeah,
It's,
I know,
you
but
know,
it's-
I agree with you there, but you know, I like
who do you agree with?
with Larry about
It's not
you know,
LSD.
you know,
Ecstasy is-
I mean, it
I've
could
done
be
ecstasy.
Really
It's not-
therapeutically,
It ain't
it's a
LSD.
great-
I'll tell you that much.
But it's one more indole on
Pretty
top of the
interesting at
speed.
times.
No,
Really?
it's a one-leg
I just-
crystal.
I just-
You don't think it's psychedelic?
Maybe I didn't do
Of
enough.
course it is.
No, not
Well, I only
not
did
like
it once, but-
Psychedelic.
Like
Psychedelic should
psychedelic.
scare the shit out of you first, and
Yeah.
you should have a
Exactly.
death.
Exactly. Exactly.
Reborn on the other side with some new ideas. It should,
exactly.
I don't know.
there should be
I
some-
had one of those psychedelic psychiatrists give me MDMA some time ago, and he said, you know, you have to be careful with this stuff because, you know, little girls take it and dance in discos all night.
Mm-hmm.
But he says, you know, it'll light up the inner light.
Oh, there's no doubt that
That's like ecstasy. Very. What do you mean? MDMA.
MDMA. I
Very
remember
close.
MDMA.
There's
We
one.
used to call it.
That was MDA.
MDA. We used to call it. We used to call it Dr. A up in Canada. MDA.
It was like Freddie Stewart, I said, Sly's brother. I said, you know, you guys were all on Angel Dust. He goes on. PBC.
Yeah.
What was Angel Dust?
PPC or something.
Yeah.
PPC, right?
Yeah, and I said, you guys were all on PPC. He goes, no, man.
No, Freddie
We
went.
smoked Angel Dust.
What about? Hey, tell me about DMT.
The lunchman's
It was
acid.
a
Working
short,
man's acid. Yeah.
very psychedelic, very intense high.
DMT was very, very, very seemingly psychedelic, but again, you know, it's the same premise in everything. If you don't leave a little bit of yourself behind, having actually given some of your former self to allow the new self to develop, it's not a psychedelic. It's something else. You know, you have to leave a pound of flesh every time you really. You do.
On one DMT high, I saw Henry Purcell playing the harpsichord, but it was in a cartoon, but he was really playing it. You know, it really sounded
No,
good.
the high on DMT, like you can sit outside and see little gnomes running around and stuff. I mean, it opens up a part of your consciousness that
But there's a
I
weird.
personally didn't, you know, find was going to be very constructive to
Yeah.
my
I guess it's
well-grounded
very
life.
visual, isn't
But
it?
there's a weird thing about DMT. I mean, it's hard to. It just sort of appears, right?
Yeah.
People don't go out and like look for DMT. I mean,
Yeah.
my experience was that it just sort of.
It appeared to me by Rusty Goldman, who
Okay.
was over at his house. Does
Because-
everybody know him?
Because you don't see it much, right?
Yeah.
It's not very
There's a
common.
whole sort of psychedelic underground, Larry.
I missed it.
There's
Cultivates this
amazing
stuff.
chemists
You
that
know
still
what?
exist.
It came into
Yeah.
this.
You know, I go to the
in
Oregon
the
Country
50s.
Fair, and these guys will show up and they'll open
Yeah.
the thing up, and it's
Oh,
like
I've got
Working.
Abigail
Yeah.
and I've got this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just amazing. No thanks. You know,
Yeah.
it took me years to actually get my feet on the ground, kind of.
Well, the whole thing started with these crazy psychiatrists
Yeah.
in the 50s that tumbled to it. And one of them, Murray Korngold, 93 years
I
old,
know
is
some.
in San Francisco. Murray had a practice in Beverly Hills with a guy named Oscar Janiger, and they both tumbled to LSD about 1958. And they started giving it to everybody. Now think about this. So there's no psychedelic culture, there's no supporting underground, there's no movement. He's just handing out these pills and saying, oh, you've got problems with alcohol, listen, let's do this. Oh, you've got sex problems, here, do this.
I don't think the impact that psychedelics had for us, for those people would have been the same. because-
Changed everybody's lives.
Of course, it changed their lives, but it was in such an undefinable context. They had life-altering experiences and a lot of insights, but they didn't have the whole social, you know, relationship, relative.
No, it didn't become a
experience.
cultural thing, it was strictly personal.
Yeah.
Right? But it's an enormously influential body of people. I mean, Marlon Brando, James Coburn, Jack Nicholson were all patients of Murray's, and lots of those Beverly Hills.
I have friends that
movers and
used to go to
shakers.
James Coburn's all the time in LA. It's apparently had the coolest, most psychedelic house, and like
Murray
was always
was
asking
his
for
guy,
anybody
yeah.
who wanted it.
Yeah, so you know, the entry point was from non-cultural avenues, and these California psychiatrists, there's Leo Zeff is a guy that created something called the Family, and the Family lasted for years. And
Yeah, I remember
it's
the Family,
it's probably still in existence, and you know, it is a anonymous, semi-secret, well, no, real secret organization that was devoted to different psychedelic experiences, and they had all the you know, the whole cookbook of the pharmacy was available.
But the thing that made it a cultural thing was what, the acid test and Kesey and all of that out here in Leary. It was Kesey more out here, right?
Yeah,
That
no,
was a product of it more than
Kesey was great.
There
Did
was
Kesey
a
start
lot
doing it about the time you started doing it, Sam?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
You were in, like, the same kinds
That
of-
was like the Dead in La Honda, and that when there were the warlocks changing over to the Dead.
Kesey ran across it as a volunteer for tests in
Right.
Stanford.
Yeah.
He was a test
Right,
subject.
exactly.
And I think that's like 61, 62.
Which is
Very
61,
early.
62 is when you started doing it too,
Larry,
right?
Kind of, yeah.
One of the real delineating lines in the whole LSD experience is everybody we're talking about who initially got involved with LSD, really highly educated people.
Right.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, people that, really just didn't have that much stuff in their brain to really free associate with started taking
Right.
the drugs. And the experience started really being portrayed as that more than
Yeah.
where it initially
Well,
came.
Yeah.
the whole psychedelic scene was educated, right? I mean, if you look at
Yeah.
all of the art, it was all really intelligent. I mean, there was a lot of intelligence behind it. It wasn't just the big part. I suspect that a party was
Takes me back
a
to
good
being-
part of it. But the art, the writing, I mean, it was a mixture of a lot of different things that were all, and that's probably because it was based on a drug that required a little bit of intelligence to assimilate properly.
Well,
Definitely
to
mental and
freely-
spiritual.
It's like William Buckley said, he says, like, I smoked pot once. It was kind of cool. He says, I could see that if you had a lot of stuff in your head and you were smart, you could really freely associate a lot of stuff. He says, but unfortunately, the super slacker knuckleheads that actually smoke pot don't have anything in their heads. So the whole experience in general just doesn't stand up.
So when did it start getting exciting around the whole LSD thing here? Like, what were the beginnings of that Chet Helm and the first shows? You remember the first
Yeah.
shows? When was the moment when there was like, there's something going on here?
I think it was before that. It predated that a little bit, but predated the Avalon, the Fillmore,
No, I think Sam's like, a few years ahead of me, and the people that turned all us on
Yeah.
basically were, up to 10 or 15 years
Yeah.
older than us.
Did either of you attend that first show at the Longshoremen's Hall?
Yeah, I did.
Yes.
Because everybody that I spoke to that attended that, and I guess there's 1,000
I got the
people.
signed original poster right
Yeah.
here.
That's when we knew it was citywide.
Everybody
The
said
scene
that's
was
like,
city.
wow.
Longshoremen's
Look at
Hall
all
of
these
all people,
Yeah.
places,